Howdy folks, welcome to another episode of DevOps Diaries, and it's a pleasure this week to be joined by Dave Carroll. Dave, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Hey, thanks, Jack. This is nice to be here.
Yes, it's, like I say, an absolute pleasure to have you, and I'm very fortunate that I had the introduction that I had to you, as I'm really excited about this conversation and the journey that you've had. For people that are unfamiliar with the name Dave Carroll, who is Dave Carroll, and why have I asked him to be on my podcast?
Yeah, okay, so obviously I used to work for Salesforce. I guess that's obvious at this point. Um, I started working at Salesforce when we first launched our developer program. At that point in time in 2003, we had no developer program. As a matter of fact, the only way that you could integrate with the Salesforce platform was through our XML RPC API. We had a set of documentations that we were prepared to give to partners at the time. We didn't have many, but it would cost you $10,000, and you had to be able to demonstrate some amount of market penetration already in our customer base. And that was clearly a closed system. And so the first thing that we did in 2003 was open that up, rewrote the documentation around XML RPC, made it free, put it on the internet, and then uh, started some chat rooms, basically in terms of I forget what the software was called, but it's just the ability to post questions and get answers to things related to the APIs. And so, for me, becoming a Salesforce employee after having been a Salesforce partner, um, and also a developer for, one of the early developers on the platform, I became very passionate about providing tools and capabilities to the developers to just ease whatever tasks that they needed to do. And so eventually, that rolled around to DevOps finally one day. I think maybe there's some, if you stretch the definition of DevOps, just about everything that you provide to a developer is related to that. And so, yeah, I have a whole list of things that I did in the early days that I'd be happy to talk about, depending on what the appetite is for hearing that stuff.
Yeah, no, well, there's going to be questions throughout related to and from development. I guess the what excites you about technology? You spent 20 years at Salesforce in a number of roles and providing developer tooling, also advocating for developers and best practices, improved practices, and really building a community out there. What is it about technology that you love so much, and how did that kind of shape that journey at Salesforce and even pre-Salesforce?
Yeah. So the journey did start prior to my joining Salesforce. I was involved in a couple of different startups. It was around the turn of the century. And so, 1997 or 7, 8, something like that. The big years of the internet kind of creating its little bubble. And in one of the roles at the startup that I was with, my role was CTO. It's a four-person operation, right? So it's kind of a grand title for somebody who's basically chief cook and bottle washer. Um, but the solution that I was developing at the time, it was on the Microsoft platform. It involved this SQL database from Microsoft. It involved an ASP server. I was trying to implement, kind of three tiers of the back end for this web application that we were building. It was truly a web application where a customer would enter data, and they could go back and retrieve that data, edit that data. We would aggregate all of that data and provide it back to the other customers. But the whole point there is it was a multi-tenant single database architecture, which is very similar to the architecture of the Salesforce cloud. And so at the time that I started becoming aware of Salesforce and the opportunities started coming, I'm like, well, yeah, I kind of agree with that architecture. That's the one that I landed on. The difference is that I saw at that point in time Mark's vision of like cloud computing, right? From a developer's angle, right? Where I don't have to put those servers up. I don't have to have my application server, my database server, my security gateway, and all of those kind of things. Those will be handled for me. And I thought, wow, that is if I had that when we started this, when we started this other company, we would have taken a completely different approach. And so that's kind of the things that attracted me to Salesforce was the vision for developers on this particular type of architecture that was really representing the future of cloud development.
Yeah, I guess first the initial question off the back of that, do you feel like they were succeeding in that kind of grand vision for development on the platform in those early days?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, when we look at the platform and the capabilities today, um, we kind of are spoiled by everything that's there. Back in the early days, we weren't even thinking of the kind of things that we could do today on the
Mm,
platform. And so it's like, oh, okay, so the platform initially was just a set of APIs, but it very quickly grew into the customizability and the integratability that we see today. And I think that was, I've spoken to many people over the years about Salesforce and what made Salesforce successful. And I attribute it to two things. One is that customizability. It started with being able to modify your own database, right? So add
yeah,
fields and add tables and things like that. Um, and then that grew into S controls and it grew into like our web components that we have today. But it all started, from that customizability. And the second thing is the integratability. We really focused on our APIs. As a matter of fact, a lot of the things that you needed to do for customizing the platform at that time were only available through APIs. We didn't have a nice slick front end that you could, do connectors to different platforms and things like that. You needed APIs to be able to essentially mash up your system with the backend system. So
yeah.
while it was kind of simplistic, on the other hand, it was new. No one else was really providing this at the same kind of level that Salesforce was.
Yeah, and I guess to some end, nobody even now is doing the same thing that Salesforce are to that level of customizability in your platform that you need it to be.
Yeah, not really. I mean, there's a lot of platforms out there now that seem to be pretty good depending on what your needs are. The needs are, of course, what drives the decision making when it comes to purchasing these type of functionalities. Um, One of the things that we were in the early days, we were in competition with Siebel, right? And so
Mm,
the thing that we tried to tell people was, well, you can go ahead and buy software from Siebel and then spend 2 years of contractors paying contractors to get it to work for you, right? Or you need to change your business to match the way the software works. And so by us providing this customizability, this integration features, we're able to allow the people inside their IT department to make these customizations to basically mold the Salesforce CRM and platform to match the business instead of the other way around. And so we had this big wall poster from Siebel of all the integration things that you would need to do. And it was just a complete eye chart, about 3 feet by 2 feet, and really illustrated the point of like those systems are so complex, they need to be simpler and yet flexible. And so, that I think that Salesforce is still achieving that goal today.
Speaking of flexible and customizable, you mentioned that you started life in kind of Salesforce as Salesforce partner. Program was small and worked worked on that side of things. But in 2006, you co-authored a book called "Developing Applications for the AppExchange Platform." What components of success are there for developing successful AppExchange products? For anybody even now, and where has that kind of stemmed from? Like, what's kind of been the ethos from back then, and is that still true today in terms of developing those applications and being able to deliver that specialized and repeatable customizations for industries or whoever it might be?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there's, you can take a perspective that there's two types of development that you could do on the platform. One is as an AppExchange partner, where you're essentially writing software that needs to work inside of any customized customer version of Salesforce, versus the other kind where it's like, it's my org, I'm doing the customization, so I don't have to worry so much about packaging and supporting multiple customers. So you end up kind of maybe taking some shortcuts and doing some things that are one-off as far as custom solutions that you probably wouldn't do if you were an AppExchange partner. So some of those things that you need to think about as an AppExchange partner is to just really adhere to the best practices that Salesforce does provide for these partners with respect to the things that you want to deliver to the customer. So you don't put a bunch of code in your HTML pages. At the time, you wouldn't put a bunch of code in S controls. Instead, you would use things like today, Flow Builder. In the past, it was the business rules and the logic that's kind of built in, that's triggered by database events and things like that. By doing that, now you are able to very easily package it, number one. And number two, when you go to support it, and the best way to think about supporting these AppExchange packages is what happens when you have a new version or a new subversion, right? How much can be basically versioned in place versus ripping out whole chunks of Apex and putting in new Apex and things like that. And so the things that are point and click is the easiest way to boil it down as far as what your solution involves, are the ones that are going to be most supportable.
Yeah, and speaking of packaging, you had a hand in your later years at Salesforce in building a lot of the tooling that we're familiar with now, developers are familiar with now, and the DX platform. What was your kind of vision for Salesforce DX and developer tooling based on all those years that you spent as a partner or building things for the platform anyway? What did you kind of see as the main challenges that you wanted to streamline and really put in the hands of developers on the platform so that they could be successful?
Well, I think that having always been very hands-on with the platform, I probably had, I don't know, 30 odd developer editions that I would screw around with. And the things that I was running into that I knew other customers and developers would run into had to do with portability. And so, maybe I'd have built something that doesn't necessarily fit neatly into the packaging, but I know that I have this cool metadata API, right? That will allow me through an API to actually create these customizations. And at the time, I was so when I built the first CLI, I did it as an open source project, and really I was in the process of kind of, well, how much can I do with Node.js? How much can I actually accomplish in terms of something that you can invoke at the command line that you can script with common Unix scripting approaches, things that could be run over and over very easily, including things like, what do I do with all these logins? How do I automate that access to the APIs? Because every API, with the exception of the actual login API, requires authentication. So, how do I manage these credentials and tokens and all that kind of stuff? And so, I was using that primarily for creating demo orgs and learning orgs, because we would travel all around the country or all around the world and try to teach people how to use the platform. And we needed a way to very easily kind of get to some baseline above just a empty brand new developer edition for these developers. And so that's where that came about. And then about maybe it was 2008. I can't remember the time frame, but then we acquired Heroku, and Heroku is all about this command line driven way of doing development, right? And we had somebody at Heroku decide they wanted to learn Go, and so they said, well, I'll just do a new version of the CLI using Go. And Go was super cool because it was, while it was a bit restrictive at that point in time, in other words, it was very static. You didn't link libraries. So when you delivered a Go application, the whole thing was compiled into an executable, which made it, very portable. And you could target whatever architecture you want. So now I can run this thing on a PC, I can run it on a Mac, I can run it on, for that matter, even the Internet of Things, little compute platforms, right? Which was always kind of fun. And so I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm going to learn Go too, and we're going to contribute this, and we're going to put this up on the internet, and as a shared project on GitHub. And eventually, we went back to Node.js, because Node.js was becoming more and more powerful. There were very few people that can contribute to the Go projects, just because it wasn't as popular a language at the time. And that CLI, which is the original CLI, still lives on in an open source project that when I joined the DX team, I said, well, I can't play with that anymore, because we have our own version of the CLI now, which was basically a fork of that open source project. And so one of the community guys that was a big contributor said, hey, I'll take it over. I use this thing all the time in my work. And so it's still a pretty, say, fairly active project today. But so I think I might have varied from your original question, but the impetus for these things was really essentially to be able to have some repeatable processes that essentially would seed a brand new developer edition with a bunch of code and tables and data, things like that.
Yeah, get going as easy as possible, as frictionless as possible, and build great things.
Yeah, and the data was a big piece of it, because you can install functionality, essentially code and interface UIs, business logic, but it doesn't pay off unless there's data behind it, right? So it's like,
Right.
oh, I installed this, but like it doesn't show me anything. And so figuring out things like the old Lexi loader, data loader, that was built by Lexi, I can't pronounce his last name, Parayev, I think. Those kind of tools, loading data, generating data, so that you would have something to actually work with and experience after the installation, was super important.
Yeah, no, it's that seems to be one of the bigger challenges when I speak to customers these days, is how do we effectively maintain test data that is, fit for purpose. You know, we want to go out and we want to test these applications that we've built. This flow executes how it's supposed to execute these days, or what have you. And that seems to be a real challenge. And there seems to be like nobody wants to do a full sandbox refresh for UAT because you know it's time consuming and you can only do it once every 30 days and what have you. Is there challenges, other challenges that kind of remains like that when you're building like the CLI or any of that functionality that you were just like, yeah, this is gonna change some lives, or well, these are the common things that you mentioned, community forums and already at the start of the conversation. Was there anything that was cropping up consistently? You were just like, you know, that's a pain in my backside too when I'm playing around in my 30-40 development edition orgs, that you were just like, yes, let's make this as seamless as possible.
Yeah, but I think that the way that I think about it is, you know, I had a great job because my job was to inspire people, show them what they could do on the platform. My job wasn't to deliver high quality software. And so I wasn't thinking in terms of test suites. I wasn't thinking in terms of, you know, maybe data sets for doing testing and that kind of stuff. And so those came about later in the DX cycle. We always had a selfish reason for talking about testing, particularly Apex code, which is you know, these code coverage requirements. The code coverage requirements were one to help protect the customer, but primarily to give us the ability to determine if we've broken something that a customer has done with respect to Apex code.
Right.
So every release, prior to the release, we run a thing called the hammer. And the hammer basically goes through and executes customer code in kind of a pre-release sandboxy type environment. And we're looking for errors that are of no fault of the customer. And so that's where that testing came about. And it's been fantastic because, you know, the last thing you want to do is make a great, awesome improvement to the platform that breaks a bunch of code that people have written. Backwards compatibility at Salesforce was always a huge priority for us, you know. And then once the DX program got started, people started saying, and this was kind of my strategy throughout my career, is like, I can't get engineering to build this tooling that I want, so I'm going to build the tooling. And then I'm going to give it to the developers, and I'm going to make them depend on it, and then come back and start demanding that Salesforce make it better and reliable and stand behind it, right? And so that actually worked in a couple of instances. DX is one of them. It was when Wade Wegner came onto the DX team that we really started looking at this idea of ephemeral orgs used in an application lifecycle process, where you can, from within your code control system, you know, choose the one that is your favorite. They're basically just Unix boxes that are running stuff in the background. And so if we could get this, these orgs, these scratch orgs that you could spin up and tear down, and it's costly on the back end, you know, but it, you know, we were able, again, credit to Wade on this, to make the case that this is very important for our customers so that they have a reliable, trusted system that's been customized by them, and they can apply best practices that aren't specific to Salesforce development, but to more software industry development. And so that's where we started seeing the, again, with Heroku and pipelines. I'm not sure that that's gone anywhere very far these days, but the ability to make a bunch of changes, spin up an org on GitHub, have that org get data installed, then run a bunch of tests, verify that everything's working within your customizations, your specific unit tests, was very important. And is just kind of a more of an organic offshoot of the power that people started to realize with the ability to use these tools like CLI.
Yeah, yeah, I really like Scratchworks. I was chatting to Jason Lantz a few episodes back on the podcast, who and we had a long talk about Scratchworks and about second generation packaging and that side of things. I still don't understand why more people don't use them. I think the uptake there is great among people that are familiar with, you talk about application lifecycle management best practices and all those that whole realm. But I when I'm out and about in the community, I speak a lot at community conferences, and I say Scratchworks to someone, they go, "Yeah, we don't use them." And then I go to the more developer-led groups, and they're just like, "Yeah, Scratchworks can't get enough."
Yeah. Well, I think that, that Salesforce is really good at marketing, and one of the things that we've done, we did over the years was say like it's going to be 50% faster to develop on the platform at less cost and all of that stuff. And then what that did, I think, is it caused a lot of people to kind of go like, okay, so this isn't like a traditional software platform. So I won't treat it like that. It's point and click and, maybe a little bit of, I don't know, not mission critical necessarily for the way we're using the platform. And I like to kind of put that in context when I was talking to people is like, okay, so there's steps to doing enterprise software development. One step is the due diligence on the front end where you're doing design, you're doing database mockups, you're figuring out flows and things like that. Basically, you're doing the architect job, right? And then there's the build phase. Now, the build phase is the one where we say, hey, it's going to go a lot faster. It's going to be much easier. But you still have to put the same energy and care into the front step as you would any other software environment. Even, today, Salesforce, the use cases for some of the custom applications on Salesforce are mission critical, right?
Yeah.
It's become where there used to be like this, if you think of like a solar system and the sun was, I don't know, SAP or maybe some Microsoft tool. And then there's satellites all around that sun. Salesforce is one. But over time, Salesforce has moved kind of to the middle now. And everything else is kind of tied in via integrations as satellites around that. Which means that, you know what? You're spending a lot of money on this. You can't cut corners when it comes to the way that you approach your application development, which includes the best practices about lifecycle management. In other words, testing your changes, publishing your changes to a acceptance org, getting approval, and then pushing those changes out. And that's, again, where this automation capabilities from DX really made a lot of sense.
What's your favorite API?
My favorite API, you know what? It's one that I killed at Salesforce.
Uh-oh.
It wasn't my choice. We used to have an API. It was, we acquired a company called MetaMind. And the APIs that came with the MetaMind acquisition were, AI stuff, machine learning APIs. And so they're really a lot of fun because you can put in a bunch of pictures and give them assigned categories essentially to them, labels. And then you could, once you've got the model trained, you can feed in another picture and say, hey, categorize this for me. And there's just a lot of fun things you can do with that. And I talked about this at London's Calling, I don't know, probably 10 years ago now, where I put in a bunch of pictures of some friends over in the UK and trained the model on them. And to illustrate kind of the problems with some AI. I trained a bunch of pictures of Homer Simpson, as well as some pictures of the actual friends there. It turns out that when I asked it to identify a picture of one of his friends, his name's Sean Holmes. He's no longer in the IT world today, but it would identify him as Homer Simpson, and that was just pretty funny. And of course, because it's AI, you have to make it seem magical. And so I would use the inbuilt voice synthesizer on the Mac Unix system to actually read out the results. So it's like 98% chance that this is a picture of Homer Simpson, and you're staring at Sean.
Poor Sean.
But that was fun.
Or maybe he left it.
And there was some. It also, in addition to the object detection and image classification, that had some language APIs for sentiment and intent, things like that. And the thing is, it's like you trained your own model through the API, and you invoked the trained model through the API. It was completely API driven and really approachable and accessible for people that just, we can't all be machine learning experts. And unfortunately, business requirements and lack of adoption forced us to shut that down about a year ago.
That's a shame. But it's funny that you mentioned AI, because one of the things I was going to ask you about next was your involvement with Einstein AI, and on that side of the product team. Tell me a little bit about that, and where you started. So what year was that you started in that team? That was...
Oh man, I'm really bad at recalling years.
It all blurs into one after 20, right?
I want to say what's to 2024. I want to say it was probably like 2018, 2019. And I joined the Einstein team and actually took over the product management of the MetaMind APIs. And so, that's another reason why I was really sad that I had to kill it. But from then on, my contributions into the Einstein platform were primarily with our internal data scientists as our customers. And so the product that we had to put together was the ability for the data scientists to, within certain boundaries, access data that they could generate solutions from, both around the language capabilities as well as some other capabilities, to be able to invoke code in different steps depending on what the AI capability was. And so it's very kind of infrastructure stuff that ultimately I think we're going to end up exposing this to our external developers. It's just a big challenge because these things are compute intensive. You are running code. So you pre-process data, you post-process data. There's a lot that happens in there, and not to mention the access of the data needs to be maintained in a way that we meet our obligations to privacy and all that kind of stuff with our customers. And this goes beyond running Apex. This is just like maybe Python code or something a little deeper that runs in its own, spawns a process, and it runs in that process. It has very restricted abilities to communicate with other processes within the system. And so those are all things that our customers are going to want to do with respect to AI as their AI sophistication levels increases. And what we found is that a lot of our customers span a broad spectrum of that sophistication, where some, they want to do their own model training. Others, they just want to use pre-trained models and get the results. If you imagine a flow that goes out and determines some probability of something that the AI knows, think of like, I don't know, lead scoring or something. This lead has a high percentage chance of being convertible. Those customers, they just want to be able to input the data and then get the results and then have their custom logic branch out from there. So it does span a spectrum, but it's costly for customers to implement these machine learning systems by themselves, right? And so I kind of, back in the early days, we called Salesforce the democratization of enterprise software. In other words, we were creating software that could be used by the biggest enterprises, have concrete value, and allowing smaller companies who don't have the means to like buy a Siebel or something like that and spend 2 years implementing it, access to the same system. And so today, I think that one of the, and I can't speak for Salesforce anymore, but the direction that I saw things going before I left was that we wanted to democratize the ability to do data science on your own data within the context of Salesforce. So
Do you
I
think
think
that's going
that's
to be pivotal?
a valuable thing.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to be pivotal to the success of adoption of AI tooling and software, Salesforce or not? Is that democratization of being able to do that is integral to the
It's hard to
future success
say.
of
I
AI
mean,
products?
I think it depends on how well Salesforce provides out of the box abilities within. So there's, when it comes to these kind of things, like, are we going to do it for you, or do you need to do it? It's like we used to say, use point and click everywhere you can, and once you can't, we give you Apex code, right? So
Right.
that gives you the escape hatch to go beyond what we give you. And with Flow, we're starting to see a very similar thing, but the flow is getting more sophisticated, and we will we can define a set of use cases, and we can like provide that functionality. But once you creep a little bit away from those use cases, you're going to need to do some things yourself. And so I think that as far as pivotal to the adoption of AI within Salesforce, I'm not sure it's pivotal, um, but it will certainly be important to a small set of large customers.
Right.
Right. So the customers who have Mark's phone number will probably want these kind of capabilities.
So we're talking a very small subset.
Well, it's a small subset, but they do carry a lot of weight.
um, in 20 years Salesforce career, something that you told me as well is the developer evangelism team is one of the best that you've worked in, and one of the teams that you had the most fun in. What does it take to have a successful team of developer evangelists and really build on that wider network of professionals that are out there and really engage with them?
Yeah, I think I mean that there's a lot of things that go into creating a successful developer evangelism team. Um, One, I think the primary requirement for an evangelist, or I think more common today is to call them developer advocates, whatever, is to, as the advocate, you need to be passionate about the fact that what you are telling others about, how you're telling them to be successful, that you believe it, right? It that you're just not a shill saying, "Oh, tell me what to say, and I'll go repeat it to a group of people." And everyone that I hired, that I was involved, maybe tangentially in hiring for the evangelism team, had that passion for the solutions. Um, the other thing that's related to that, and this is about honesty and trustworthiness. It's really essential that you're viewed by your audience as somebody who one cares about them, but also knows what they're talking about. And so, um, given that a lot of our evangelism was, maybe half of the evangelism was about various different APIs, that you could invoke from many different kinds of technologies, it was important that if we are talking to a set of JavaScript developers, Node developers, if you will, today, that we knew something about Node, that we would go to some uh, presentations, conferences, meetups, in that community, and not just be like a carpetbagger coming in from the outside, not knowing much about their community. So you have to be able to speak their language. Otherwise, you can say something specific to a technology and be way off base, and they're going to go like, "This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Why should I believe anything else he says?" And he's not part of my tribe. I can tell by the way he talks about the technology, and so that's super important. I think one of the things about developer advocacy with relation to Salesforce was one of our challenges was getting people to understand the power that we provided with the platform. And I felt personally that a good way to do that was to demonstrate using our technologies in unique ways, right? Like, and I tried to instill this on my team as well. I asked them out of, every 40-hour work week that they take at least 4 hours and do something relate that has a relationship to our technology, but maybe isn't specific to it, just to, number one, keep their toe in the water as far as other technologies is concerned. Number two, just because, there's some really cool things that can happen when you are given the permission to be an explorer. And I don't mean that in the sense of a trailblazer. Maybe it's the same. I don't know, but I try to stay away from the lingo. Um, so, as an example, I got two examples that I think are really fun. So there is a fella, Pat Patterson, that worked for me for a while, and his son was really into Minecraft.
My
And
son too.
in Pat's in Pat's Explorer time, he built an integration that you could add to Minecraft that integrated with Salesforce, basically with contacts and opportunities and things like that. And it was he ended up releasing an open source thing called Forcecraft. And the idea was you would log in through a little command line interface at Minecraft, and then it would create buildings in your city based on each account would be a building. And every opportunity that you had was a level, a story on the building. And
Oh,
so if you
nice.
had six opportunities, it was a six-story building. And the you could also spawn characters that are associated with those buildings, and those would be the contacts. And you'd see them running around in Minecraft with little labels saying Rosie Gonzalez. Right? I mean, I think we've all seen that contact, Rosie Gonzalez, from the developer edition. Um, and then you could toggle some things on the wall, which would like close your opportunity. And once your opportunity closes, all of a sudden you get some gems or something like that. It was crazy, but it really demonstrated like you can use this API from just about any system. And so don't limit yourself to thinking that you have to use, I don't know, what we demonstrated initially on. Yeah, it's very flexible. The second example is I mentioned that we would go around teaching these classes all over the place, and we had to have syllabi that we would hand out. And because we do 3 releases a year, that would constantly be changing, and it just was really hard to keep up with that. And so Josh Burke, I'm sure you've heard of Josh, right?
Too. I love Josh. Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty famous in my mind. Um, he's actually the father of Trailhead. He created a system by which we could let people learn on their own and also kind of check their work. So run some code behind to see if they created this object name, whatever. It was
Yeah.
called Metals. And so Josh is a big fan of gaming. And so he was trying to do some gamification around the learning process for our developers. And that is what eventually evolved into Trailhead. So, there's in addition to, maintaining credibility within the various communities, maintaining trust inside your own organization that what you're doing is valuable and although it's hard to trace, still contributing to the success of the company. There's also some unforeseen happy side effects that I think are just the result of allowing people to be creative and kind of go off the reservation once in a while.
Yeah. And I think those stories are important for, people listening to this podcast or who haven't heard those kind of stories before. It's just like, if you have the time and space, go and see what you can create for your own organizations. It might not solve the problem directly that you're trying to solve or what have you, but you never know. Like I think it's Charlie Isaacs likes to speak about, like, the art of possible. You
Yeah,
don't know
yeah.
until you play with it.
Charlie is a good guy and also one of these kind of visionary type of individuals, not boxed in by the standard use case.
Yeah, no, and an absolutely incredible human to boot too. So
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. I would see his Facebook posts. He's all over the place, always smiling, always with a bunch of smiling people around him.
yeah, absolutely, or doing a handstand or something silly in the middle of an expo center. I don't know.
So yeah,
Dave,
the passion for development is key. The passion for the product that you're selling is key. And what's priceless, just from like, if anybody is considering becoming a developer advocate, the to see people get a concept, the light bulb go off in their head, to come back to you and say, "Oh my God, you don't know what you just solved for our company that we've been struggling with," is immensely satisfying. Now, I ran into somebody at a Dreamforce a couple of years ago, and he says, Dave, I know you don't remember me, but you came and you did a presentation that I attended, and it totally changed the direction of my career. I'm now a Salesforce partner, and I attribute it to you coming and speaking to us and teaching us how to use this stuff. And I was like, man, that is amazing. That's really, just, I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but changing a person's life in a positive way is very, very satisfying.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I feel very, very fortunate when I have given presentations, and a lot of the presentations that I give are helping people understand Git for the first time.
Hmm.
Usually aims at more the admin spectrum, folks that aren't familiar with it, and they're just like, have people come to me afterwards and say, oh, I get why they're talking about this thing, that thing, or the other thing. Like I didn't, I didn't understand what a pull request was for, or why we needed it, or how to handle the. They keep talking about these merge conflicts. I don't know, don't know what they are, and why that's a pain in their butt when they happen. And yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
that's an experience that resonates with me for
Yeah,
sure.
that's awesome.
Um, Dave, what kind of last stream of questions for? I won't promise it's the last question because I always say to somebody this is the last question before I let them go, and then it's never the last question. But what advice would you give to any kind of aspiring developer in the ecosystem now? They, regardless of whether they're an admin looking at learning development or starting to code or adopting more developer based practices, I guess, or entering the Salesforce ecosystem even for the first time from another technology. What advice would you give those people?
Um, that's an interesting question. Well, I think one piece of advice is to I think our trailhead is an amazing place to get started on the platform. Absolutely incredible. Um, but I would also say like find uh, an actual project, have a goal, because learning a technology or a platform without a goal is really hard. And if you do have a goal, once you reach it, you're like, look at what I did. I built something. I made this. Um, and so that with that goal in mind, it's going to make it easier to navigate the things that are important for you to learn for the reason why you're even doing this. I mean, there's so many things on the platform. You can learn about stuff that you may never use. And so if you have a goal, an end game in mind, then your learning track is going to be much more useful to you, even if you're not using Trailhead, even if you're just going through documentation and trying to do it on your own. Um, I, I like to tell people that I went to school and I got a degree in computer science, and it was a long time ago, and we did things like program and assembly with punch cards and stuff. And I didn't find that super useful. And so what I tell people is the most value that I got out of that degree was learning how to navigate documentation, how to find stuff. Today it's like how to Google properly, because it doesn't matter what language it is, it doesn't matter what platform it is. If you know how to find the answers to the questions that you have, then you're going to be successful. Languages is just syntax at the end of the day, and so once you've understood the concepts of program control, loops, if-then statements, those things are common across all languages. And so, once you've got a grasp on that, you can write in any language. So if you're just trying to learn Apex, maybe you start with a different language that doesn't have so many restrictions, um, basic or something that you run locally. There's there's a there's a great website called Replit that allows you to run early programs as you're learning, kind of on a cloud-based backend, and it gives you all the syntax errors and other hints at why your code might not be working. But if you learn that first, then when you get to Apex, you're going to have all the foundational concepts in your mind, and again, it's just a matter of syntax. Um, Learning some of the eccentricities of Apex versus trying to learn those at the same time that you're trying to establish a foundation. Yeah, so those would be two things that I would advise. As far as the platform itself, I would focus on the implementation of business logic and really get your head around flows, because with flows you can do so much, and you're not limited to the little widgets that you drop on the flow screen when you understand Apex and can invoke Apex from your flow. Once you can invoke Apex, you can now have within your flow access to any API just about in the world, right? Because you can call out to those APIs through your Apex. And so that would be maybe my third piece of advice, is like really, really pay attention to flow. You can, by the way, invoke flows from Apex as well. And so what that does is that allows you to write a solution, and then from your Apex, you can go leverage that solution. If you need to modify your logic or some part of that solution, you do it in your flow, and now your Apex just works, right? So yeah, it's a really strong technology that I think developers need to pay attention to.
There you go. There you go. Have a vision, and then then go learn go learn all the things, or well, the subset of things that help you with that vision.
Yeah. I mean, like I had a Pi. What are those things called? I want to
Raspberry
learn
Pi?
how to program the Raspberry Pi, right?
Yeah.
And so what I did was, this is how geeky I am. I'm not as geeky anymore, but I used to come home from work and like start programming the Raspberry Pi. And what I did was I decided I wanted this Pi to be able to communicate with my Harmony remote, and I wanted to be able to have it look at my Salesforce calendar to see if I was available, and should it just set something to record that I had a list of things that I wanted to watch, and if it's on my Salesforce calendar I wasn't available, then it would set up the recording.
Oh,
And
nice.
in that way, I learned how to access the Raspberry Pi, as well as a couple of other APIs that were kind of fun. So, pardon me. Yeah, have a goal.
There's
Pick a
have a goal.
project.
There's an application for anything, right? Or there's a way of applying what you learn in it. You can think of a problem that you have and solve it. You know, like you say, like having your TV record what you want when you needed it to, based on
You
that
don't, you don't, you
information.
don't, yeah, you don't need to know that there's a solution. You just need a problem. And then you go say like, well, let's go see if there's anything out there. I think one last piece of advice is, I'm probably just like everybody else. A blank page is terrifying to me, and so is a blank coding screen. And so go find something that is close to what you want to do, and if it's appropriate, in other words, there's no copyright or anything like that, cut and paste that thing and then modify it to suit your needs. And in the process of that modification, you begin to understand and learn more about the particular environment, language, and APIs that you might be dealing with. But like, you don't have to create the wheel from scratch every time.
Yeah, yeah, that's good advice. That's good. That's great advice.
With GitHub nowadays, you can find any project in any language for just about any kind of thing that you're looking to solve. And it might not be exactly, but it's a better starting point than a blank page.
Yeah. Dave, thank you so much for taking the time. I know I'm pulling you out of retirement slightly to come on this podcast and talk about this stuff.
No. The tide's going to be slack in about 30 minutes, and so that'll give me time to get out there and go try to crush some halibut.
Start fishing.
Yep.
Cool. Well, Dave, good luck in the sea, and thanks again. And hopefully, for people that have listened to this podcast and reached this episode, I hope they've enjoyed your musings as much as I have.
Great. Well, thanks for asking me to do this, Jack. It's been fun.
Thank you, everybody, and catch you next time.